Hello, everyone. It's Tania Gabrielle here. Welcome to Star Codes, the podcast where we look at an event in the stars and numbers in the Astrology and Numerology. And this is a special edition that I'm recording just a couple days after the Cancer New Moon podcast episode. And the reason is the developments that are happening in the globe, in particular the Middle East. So I wanted to showcase a part of astrology that involves an ancient astrocartography method and astrocartography itself in combination with astrology and the way that we forecast in general for all of these podcasts, and show you that there are just a tremendous amounts of historical events that are reminding us to look back to get an idea of how these frequencies that are now developing in the planets can express themselves, and also to show you literally on a physical map of the Earth how the planetary alignments can develop. So, as you know, all the outer planets are currently changing signs. Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter are moving or have already moved to 0 degrees of new signs within a few months of each other. And there is no historical context for this. So we are really paving new ground. And when you consider the cycles around the sun for each of these 5 planets, and that they are now all together ingressing into new signs, 0 degrees of new signs, it's quite extraordinary. Jupiter takes 12 years approximately to circle the sun, Saturn 28 to 30 years, Uranus 84 years, Neptune around 165 years, and Pluto around 248 years. So the fact that they're all coming together at once, that is really tremendous. And so we don't, like I said, have historical context for this. The only historical context we have that goes back 12,000 years is when Saturn and Neptune each moved into Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, 0 degrees, the first degree of the zodiac, within a few weeks of each other this spring. Neptune on March 30th, Saturn on May 24th. And that hasn't happened where they both move into the beginning of the zodiac together in 12,000 years, which is a long time. So when it comes to mundane astrology, which is the astrology of countries or regions of the earth, we have powerful tools that can forecast themes based on astrology, which is what I do in my podcast, where we look at aspects in the transits. And then personally, of course, for my personal readings, I also utilize progressed planets, and solar arcing planets, along with astrocartography when that is needed. So in mundane astrology, we can also use astrocartography, and we can also use geodetic astrology. So astrocartography is based with mundane astrology, which is the astrology of the world and countries, on main lines, just like with personal astrocartography, in relation to current or future planetary lines as they move over that country or over the capital of the country. And then we also have another tool, geodetic astrology, which is an ancient way of using astrocartography. There isn't a lot of information about geodetic astrology, but it assigns all parts of the world map to the 12 zodiac signs. Each zodiac sign is 30 degrees, just like in astrology, and it corresponds to longitude degrees. So certain parts of the world carry a signature of a certain zodiac sign. Now, geodetic astrology is an ancient form of astrocartography. It has been used at least as far back as Ptolemy in the 1st and 2nd century AD. Even prior to that, it was used. And for looking at countries, just like with astrocartography, geodetic maps can help us to forecast and understand world events. And it's not only times of conflict or war and calm and peace, but also a range of other topics can be looked at, including geographic natural disasters. Now, whether using astrocartography or geodetic astrology, each planet carries a certain signature. When a current planetary line interacts with another planetary line by crossing it or by being very close to it, right? A new energy signature is created in that part of the world. It's just like when these two planets speak to each other through transit progression or solar arc. When I say the sun is square Saturn, for example, there is a connection. When there are lines crossing or parallel to each other or close to each other, it's the same kind of interaction. It creates a new expression of both of those planets now having a relationship and therefore impacting us with both of those energies coming together. What we want to do now is look at what's going on in the Middle East, both on June 13 local time and June 22nd local time. First, I want to point out, as both an astrologer and numerologist, that 13 and 22 each reduce to the number 4. 1 plus 3 equals 4, 2 plus 2 equals 4. And 4 is the number aligned with your homeland, its borders, its boundaries, its responsibility. It's also a karmic number, and it is connected to Saturn. So it's a very powerful number. It is in the 248 triad in numerology, which is the triad of manifestation. Now note too that the U.S. is born on July 4th, that the sun in the U.S. birth chart is at 13 degrees in Cancer. 13, of course, reduces to 4, and that the U.S. initially had 13 colonies. So the number 4 and the U.S. are very connected. Now, Uranus is currently in the geodetic map transiting over Iran and has been for many years. The country of Iran is in the geodetic part of the world that is ruled by Taurus. And Taurus is the sign that Uranus moved into in 2018 and is about to leave on July 7th of this year. Now, in the fall, Uranus will be retrograding back into Taurus for a little bit and then moving out in February of next year. But the point is that Uranus is now at the very end of Taurus and moving into Gemini, and all of this is happening over that area of the world. What happened on June 13 is that another planet joined Uranus. And this other planet is Mars. And Mars moves much faster than Uranus. It takes Mars only 2 years to move around the sun. So when it crosses the globe, it literally moves a lot faster than Uranus. So Mars joined Uranus on the 13th of June and was literally right next to Tehran, the capital. And when Mars and Uranus get together in any capacity, this energy is very unstable, very unpredictable. It's nerve-wracking, and it can also be shocking. And in a personal astrology chart, it's not advisable to have any surgery or do anything really of importance while Mars and Uranus are in a challenging relationship to each other in your chart. So if Mars is transiting and square to your natal Uranus, or if Uranus is transiting and square or opposite or conjunct to your Mars. So there are many ways to look at this, but when they come together, it really sets off fireworks. And of course, Mars is also aligned traditionally with war and aggression, and that's the shadow side of Mars, and it can indicate major unexpected challenges. Now remember that first attack occurred during our current shift of all the outer planets entering new signs. And as we speak, in the last weeks and currently, we are in the middle of several 90-degree squares, which is the most tense aspect in astrology. It's 90 degrees between any planets. And these squares are taking place in the cardinal signs, in this case, Aries and Cancer. And these are the signs, the 4 cardinal signs that begin new seasons. So they are very, very powerful. They're about action, new beginnings. Currently, Saturn and Neptune are in very early Aries, 1 and 2 degrees Aries, and they're square to Jupiter and the Sun, which are in very early Cancer, 1 and 2 degrees Cancer. That's a quadruple square between all of those planets. So this is precipitating, meaning it's enhancing, especially Jupiter. It makes everything bigger. The current climate over that part of the world as Mars comes very, very close to Uranus. And then the most recent strike happened less than 24 hours ago. As I'm recording this, I'm recording it on June 22nd. That is when Mars actually crossed over Uranus. And when there's a crossing of planetary lines, it sends sparks. It's like they're touching. It's like two wires, right? In this case, they're electrical. They're live because of the Mars and Uranus energy. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now let's look at Uranus in particular, because Uranus is playing a major role at this time for the U.S. As I said, Uranus has moved to the final degree of Taurus. That actually happened on June 16th. The 29th degree of any sign is a critical degree. In fact, the final 2 degrees of any sign, 28 degrees and 29 degrees, are called critical degrees. They enhance the energy. They literally are culminating all the lessons that need to be learned before a planet moves into the next adventure, the next segment, the next new sign. So on June 16th, Uranus moved from 28 degrees to 29 degrees. It will remain there until July 7th when it moves into the new sign of Gemini. And Gemini is a very important sign for Uranus when it comes to the U.S. because that is literally the sign that in the U.S. chart, the natal Uranus is located at 8 degrees 55 minutes in Gemini. So astrologically, the U.S. is now approaching a Uranus return, meaning Uranus is returning to the birthplace in the chart. I'm sure you may know what a solar return is. It happens right around your birthday. I create solar return charts for people around their birthday where I do readings for them. Basically, it shows the upcoming year, how it will evolve based on when the sun returns exactly to the moment, to the degree and minute of your birth. It gives a preview of the next 12 months. Now, with a slow-moving planet like Uranus, it takes 84 years to experience a return. And with countries, it does make a big difference. With people, not necessarily, because, hey, when you're around 84 years old, you're not going to recall what happened when you were born 84 years ago. But for a country, it is very important. And this will be only the third time that the U.S. will have experienced a Uranus return. And I've spoken about this in previous podcasts, but just a reminder that Uranus, at the moment that the U.S. was born on July 4th, 1776, was in the sign of Gemini during the period of the Revolutionary War at the founding of the U.S. Around 84 years later, for the first Uranus return, when Uranus returned back to Gemini, that happened during the Civil War. And then the second Uranus return happened during the 1940s, which coincided with America's involvement in World War II. Now, the Civil War was a major period of internal strife. World War II was a huge period for external strife, where the U.S. was fighting a war in the Pacific and European fronts. When you now circle back to now, okay, and I've mentioned in other podcasts that Pluto began the shift at the end of November, and Uranus is the final outer planet to complete the shift on July 7th, 2025. They are the bookending planets of the big shift of the 5 outer planets, Pluto and Uranus. And why is that significant? Because in the 1960s, Uranus and Pluto were merged together. They were conjunct each other for most of that decade. Anybody born in the 1960s most likely has Uranus conjunct Pluto in their chart. And historically, the 1960s were a very chaotic time. So the symbolism of Pluto, planet of life, death, rebirth, truth, and power, disempowerment and empowerment, and Uranus, planet of freedom, sudden unexpected shifts, liberation, revolution, inspiration. It also governs inventors and space and technology. That these two planets are beginning and ending the current unprecedented move of all 5 outer planets into 0 degrees of new signs, this is highly significant. So we want to pay attention to all of these aspects. You can see I've moved from astrocartography to geodetic maps to the usual transits that we look at, and also how this will impact countries. And then looking historically back and tying together patterns that come up because they are, in a way, reminding us of certain times where energy was heightened on the planet or in a certain country. So historically, if there is a pattern during any major time period that coincides in the astrology, astrocartography, geodetic astrology, it is important to note the themes in our past history that were in play during that time. Now, the time period that we're moving in with the next Uranus return, which, by the way, for the U.S. is not exact till 2027, that is when Uranus actually moves back to its exact place, but it is already in play now. As you can see, we don't just experience a planetary alignment the moment it happens, especially with slow-moving planets. We experience it years in advance. We sense it, and the more sensitive you are, the earlier you feel it. So now that Uranus is at the very end of Taurus, the 29th degree, and about to move into Gemini, things are really heating up because the 29th degree of Taurus is a critical degree. If there's anything that Jupiter, which just recently moved into Cancer on June 9th for a year, is helping us with, Jupiter's exalted in Cancer, so this is wonderful, is to have faith in the home. Cancer governs the home, so have faith in your heart. And that faith is a trust that there is a divine order and that there are always going to be time periods in history where there is intense transformation and it can feel like chaos and catastrophe, but it is literally a way to break open something energetically, allowing the energy to be released and felt, which is a key word here, felt, so that the feeling then precipitates a shift internally, which is where all shifts happen, and help, in this case, humanity move forward to a higher vibrational state while seeing the lower vibrational state as clear as black and white, which isn't always the case, as you know. Very often we are not seeing that because we're focusing on our lives and we're living in times where there isn't that much chaos. But obviously recently, especially in the 2020s, remember when the 2020s started, I kept saying, remember, it's 2020 vision, 2020, and in terms of numerology, that means be clear, look clearly, everything's coming to the surface. You're going to see a lot more than you ever did. And that's exactly happening. We're now halfway through 2025. There are several more years left, and we have yet to see everything we need to see in order to make those proactive decisions. So these signs, these maps, astrological and astrocartography, geodetic maps, are here to help us see when something is coming to the surface. So it is important to look back historically to learn about energies that were unleashed during certain periods. For example, Pluto's move into Aquarius. This is huge because it only happens every 248 years. And in this case, it's a 20-year transit from 2024 through 2044. And I cover it in detail in my new free masterclass that you can watch for free at shiftfortheages.com. What we do is cover 11 historical previous periods when Pluto transited through Aquarius, starting hundreds of years before Christ was born. And then we focus in depth on the most recent Pluto and Aquarius period from 1777 through 1798, which was major, in order to help break down the potential developments energetically from now through 2044. right? So it all began with Pluto, planet of transformation and power. And transformation is the key word of our time. It truly is. So in Pluto in Aquarius, Astrology Shift for the Ages, what we cover is how Pluto in Aquarius will impact you personally, what to look out for, how to prepare, how to use the stunning freedom and power frequency that is emitted by Aquarius and Pluto. Of course, the 11 previous Pluto and Aquarius periods, what they reveal. I also look at an ancient Hellenistic forecasting technique that unlocks the future, and we're going to use it to hone in on the most previous period from 1777 to 1798 when Pluto was in Aquarius, and the likely outcomes for now, 2024 through 2044. So get free instant access at shiftfortheages.com. I hope you enjoyed this special edition of Star Codes, and I send you so much love, peace, grounding energy. Get your feet on the ground and get out in nature and get into your heart and be grateful and send that energy out into the world. We are now going within rather than being impacted externally. We are impacting internally and emitting our light. And that is the message, the key message of the transformation. So lots of love, and I will see you in our next Star Codes podcast episode. And by the way, this is the 300th episode, which is absolutely amazing. I forgot about that. All right, sending you lots of love. Talk to you soon.